Last week we talked about Judges 13 and the birth of Samson. And this chapter, Samson is in adulthood. We know nothing about his childhood at all. In this chapter we learn that Samson is very strong in spirit of the Lord, but very weak when it came to women. Samson finds a Philistine woman irresistible and wants her for his wife. Now the Philistines were not among the forbidden nations that Israel were never to marry. It tells you, there's a list in Deuteronomy 7 verses 1 to 4. The forbidden nations were the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and the Jebusites. The Philistines may not have been on the forbidden list, but they did have other gods, and they were uncircumcised. Samson's parents tried to steer Samson away from marrying a Philistine and marrying someone chosen from their people, but he wouldn't listen to reason or even consider marrying a woman from his own people. This was the start of the downward spiral of Samson's life, of going against what God's laws, breaking the laws, even though God used this and this was part of God's plan. God wanted to show the Philistines up, wanted to show how much strength that Samson had, and the only way, well, it wasn't the only way, but in him picking a Philistine wife and this happening, he ended up killing 30 Philistines, and it was a way of him showing the Philistines that Israel had a new champion. As I was saying, Samson was born a Nazarite and was told from a young age what he could and couldn't do. His name meant bright light or sunshine, and he was meant to be the light of hope to his people. But maybe the pressure of being a Nazarite got too much for him, and he couldn't resist the attraction of a woman who wouldn't know the laws of a Nazarite. Samson could have felt like he hadn't a choice in this, because he was a Nazarite from birth. He wasn't asked. Most Nazarites make the vow for a short time, but Samson was a Nazarite from birth, so maybe he was acting out a bit, although we don't really know. But I myself know that the minute I'm told that I can't, then I want, and maybe that's why Samson wanted what he wanted, and what he couldn't have. And although even in our sort of like wrongdoings, God can still use that. God used this to promote Samson as a mighty warrior. On the way to Timnah, Samson was attacked by a young lion, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he ripped it apart with his bare hands, saying that God had a calling on Samson's life. And even though he made poor choices, God's, still his decision to step in and give his power, his strength, so that he could overcome what was attacking him. God was always protecting Samson, because Samson had a purpose. Sometime later, a few days later, we don't know how long, but he was going back up for the marriage feast. He saw the carcass of the lion lying there, and it had a beehive in it, and he dipped his hand into it and he tasted it. Now, he wasn't allowed to touch dead things. He wasn't allowed to be near dead things, and not only did he touch it, but he dipped his hand in and he ate the honey that came out of a dead animal. So he defiled himself, and then he gave it to his parents, and he didn't tell his parents where it came from, so he had defiled them, and they didn't even know it. And again, this was the start of him breaking rules. You know, he chose an uncircumcised Philistine woman. She wasn't, obviously, she didn't get circumcised, but he chose a Philistine woman, and he touched a dead thing, and then the wedding feast was in a vineyard. And even if he hadn't drank the wine, or any fermented wine, or any vinegar made from grapes, he was in the middle of a vineyard, which he wasn't allowed to eat anything off the vine at all. But he had a week-long party in the vineyard, and you kind of think to yourself, like, he was, it's not that he wasn't allowed to touch it, but if you weren't allowed anything off a vineyard, why would you be near a vineyard? So it was the start of not keeping the laws that God had given him. At the feast, he said the riddle to the 30 men who were like his bridal party, and if they could answer it in the 7 days, he would give them 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. And if they couldn't answer it, then they had to give him the 30 linen garments and the 30 clothes. So it was, out of the eater came something to eat, out of the strong came something sweet. So after 3 days, they couldn't figure it out. But in fairness to them, it wasn't really a riddle that anyone would know, because only Samson saw the bees and the honey in the lamb's carcass. And a riddle is a question or statement that is phrased so that you really have to think of the answer and the meaning. I'll give you a few examples of what a riddle is. What has keys but opens no locks, has space but no rooms, and can enter but not go outside? A computer keyboard. What is broken before you can use it? An egg. What is full of holes but still holds water? A sponge. A riddle can be worked out, but only Samson had the knowledge of the honey in the land, and most people stayed away from dead things so they wouldn't be unclean, or just stayed away from dead things anyway, because Philistines probably wouldn't care about being unclean, but they would have stayed away from dead things. So the men came and threatened Samson's wife and father-in-law that they would burn them alive if they didn't help. And I kind of feel sorry for Samson's wife. She was damned no matter what she did. She cried and manipulated Samson into telling her the answer, and he gave in and he told her, and she told the men, who then told Samson the correct answer, which was honey. What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion? And I kind of wondered, is this where they got the idea of the show Jeopardy? What is, why is it done in a form of a question? So Samson knew his wife had told him, and he insulted her by saying, "You have played with my heifer," calling her a cow. If you hadn't threatened her, you wouldn't know the answer. And Samson was mad.